Okay, everybody, welcome back to Your Crisis Coach with Scott H. Silverman and me, Fred Carroll. How are you, Scott?
I'm well, Fred. For Monday, all things being considered, all the excitement in our country, and came off of a nice Father's Day. I hope you had a good Father's Day as well.
Yeah, we did okay. My kids did some nice stuff for me. It was pleasant, I guess.
What'd they do? Not call you and left you alone?
No, they went into my Amazon account and bought everything in my cart. Isn't that smart?
Did you have a lot in your cart?
Yeah, it was over $1,000.
Well, good for them.
Yeah, they went in and they split it evenly and just bought me everything I wanted because they don't know what I want. Now they feel like...
How do you know they didn't put it on your card and just said that?
Oh, I checked immediately.
I'm sure you did. Okay, I set you up with that question.
That's first thing. So today we're going to talk to Mary Beth O'Connor, a nice Italian name. Mary Beth O'Connor is going to tell us about her because I come into this somewhat blind. I know enough about her and stuff, but she's an author and a recovered addict and a retired judge, correct?
Yes, retired, yes.
So tell us exactly, well, first, welcome to the show, but then tell us where you started and where you came from and where you are now.
Yeah, I mean, the title of my memoir actually sort of captures the whole arc. It's From Junkie to Judge, One Woman's Triumph Over Trauma and Addiction. And I really wanted to connect the trauma and the addiction, which is such a common precursor to developing a substance use disorder. So for me, I grew up in a really violent household. I had a mother that wasn't connected, physical violence, sexual violence, verbal, emotional, just sort of a high strain environment, which made drugs very attractive at a very young age. And so first started with alcohol, which was Boone's Farm Strawberry Hill wine, which a lot of people know. But I moved on, added weed, added pills, did a lot of acid. And then I found methamphetamine when I was 16, which became my drug of choice. And I was shooting meth within 6 months at 17, full bore addiction in high school. I did a little better during college, but then at the end of college and for the next 10 years until I was 32, I was using meth again on a daily basis, basically. I had other assaults, finally went into recovery at 32 years old. Did a secular recovery, not a 12-step based recovery, and then also did a trauma and PTSD recovery. So that's sort of the overall arc.
Wow, she's done nothing in her life, huh?
Yeah. So I got to jump in, Fred. So Boone's Farm.
Yes.
I think Apple was my favorite. And methamphetamine, I'm a retired unlicensed pharmacist, and that was my product I distributed. So it sounds like it's a good thing we didn't meet when we were younger, because God knows we probably wouldn't be alive today. So, but everything you said, that's part of that era. And I remember I don't know if you remember Red Mountain used to come in a gallon. That was part of what we did when we couldn't find Boone's Farm, and we started drinking with a friend down the street who could buy things legally then. Anyway, so I'm already salivating, Mary Beth. So please continue.
Well, the judge part is just sort of the professional arc, right? So when I got sober, as I had a Berkeley degree and like a horrible resume and started out with part-time temporary work, but I worked my way back up. And at 6.5 years sober, I went to Berkeley Law, worked as a lawyer for a long time. And then I was appointed a federal judge, administrative law judge in 2020. And I took early retirement. And now I'm on the board for LifeRing Secular Recovery, the board for She Recovers Foundation. And I do a lot of writing and speaking and, try to be part of the conversation about substance use and recovery topics, educate, destigmatize, give hope, all of those things.
It's amazing. That's an amazing life. That's a full life. You lived a full life. So So at the beginning of your life, I had read in your book's bio and stuff, at the beginning of your life, you dealt with a lot of non-love, first of all, a lot of non-contact love with a parental guidance or anything. So you were pretty much set free. Is that one of the problems, is nobody was paying attention?
Yeah, because I always knew that the violence was, we know the trauma was underneath my substance use, but it wasn't until I was in treatment for my mental, for PTSD and anxiety, that I actually realized how big of a factor the sort of the emotional neglect was. That my mother, I mean, I was left with the nuns for the first 6 months of my life, and even under my mother's version of the story, she visited maybe once a week, and then I was later left for 3 years with a great grandmother, but they just weren't focused on me, not interested in me. I always knew I was on my own. And that was particularly bad because I lived in a violent environment. And so it just created a lot of anxiety for me. I had a lot of sort of OCD-like habits when I was young. And that made the sort of the relief, the anxiety relief, the stress reduction of the drugs to be really, really appealing.
So, Mary Beth, let me ask you a question. Because not a lot of people talk about trauma, but not a lot of people talk about untreated trauma, and especially people who, I think I can make this statement, in recovery, because, it's like, well, we got the 12 steps and we've got the big book and we can get everything we need there. But, the relapse rate, and I'm a product of the anonymous programs, but I've also been involved with helping others for a long time and worked at a facility and now have my own. So when did you first hear, and when did it resonate with you about trauma? Because it's a word today that's, flung around everywhere. And even people who high profile people are now saying, they suffered from trauma because they haven't had a place to hang their hat, so to speak, with some of their behavior or some of the things that happened to them. And, there's been a lot of conversation. So for you personally, what was it that caused you to start thinking about it and then start working on it? And when was that? What and when?
I mean, I wouldn't have used the word trauma when I got sober in 1994. I would have said abuse, right? I would have said I knew the abuse, I knew the violence was underneath my drug use. I knew it was a big reason that drugs were attractive to me. I always knew that. In fact, part of what kept me trapped in my addiction was that I felt that my pain was so bad because I had physical and sexual abuse in childhood. I had several different rapes, including one that lasted 6 hours by 3 men, had a violent boyfriend. I mean, there was a lot of abuse. And I really felt that my sort of 3 choices for pain management were my drug use, suicide, or I was going to end up in some kind of a psychiatric institute. I really felt like those were my options. And so drugs seemed the best choice. I was completely wrong about that, but that was part of what kept me in that box for such a long time. But when I got sober, I really knew that if I didn't deal with my abuse, I wasn't going to be happy. Like I was never going to really, I was never going to really be able to deal with my anxiety, which was severe. I didn't know I had PTSD. I was diagnosed with that, but they were right. So it was when I got home from rehab, I looked for a therapist who had what I would have called experience dealing with abuse. And that was a big part of my recovery process. And I will say that recovery took a lot longer than my substance recovery because it was older and it was more complicated.
Right. And deeply buried in a place that's really, really hard to go to. I like to say that my mind's like a bad neighborhood. I never go there alone. So, so let me bring you fast forward then. So as a judge, and Fred, this is where I get excited. So you jump in whenever you want. As a judge, did your personal experience, you think, your lived experience, help you be a better judge, if you will? Because I'm assuming, I don't know what level of judging you were doing, but I'm assuming you had people in front of you that, had issues with addiction or other things that, were part of the, outcomes of things that happened to them, or they were motivated to try to fix in their own way. How did it affect you as a person, obviously? But then when you turned it to your professional piece, were you different as a judge, you think, based on what you learned about other judges?
Yeah, so I was a federal administrative law judge, and in the federal government, that means I worked for a specific agency. So I worked for Social Security. So what I mostly handled were disability cases, and substance use and mental health were before me a lot. And there was very specific law about when you can and can't get disability benefits if you're using substances, which I had to apply. But I do think I approached the cases differently because for me, it wasn't, I was looking at it as I understood where the person was coming from. I understood the experience. I understood what often was underneath it. And so I just got in there and got the information I needed to apply the law I was required to apply and got out. In other words, I wasn't making judgments about them as a human being or their ability to be truthful or badgering them in any way, which, to be honest, some of the other judges did. I was just doing what I had to do to get the information and apply the law.
Do they know, were your people that you worked with, were they aware of your past?
No. So when I was like, a lawyer and a judge, and early in my being a judge, I never told anybody professionally. I didn't really feel like it was relevant to them. And when I passed the California bar, they only ask about like 5 years. Have you used illicit substances in a, excessive way in the last 5 years or something like that? So I never had to tell professionally because I always had more recovery time than they were asking about. But I did tell them when I joined the board for LifeRing Secular Recovery, because I had to run it through ethics because it was an outside activity and I was a judge. But I just said, I think I had like 23 years at the time. I have 23 years of sobriety and I'm going to be on this board and here's what I'm going to do. And my guess is they assumed alcohol and not she shot meth for 15 years.
Yeah.
You were not an IV drug user, so let's don't even ask her because then we have to get an explanation, and writing that down could be a deal killer,
Yes. So I did. And then when I started publishing, I was working on my book when I was still a judge, but it ended up that I wasn't ready to go look for a publishing deal until after I retired. So that worked out that way.
Interesting. That's very interesting. Good. What do you got, Scott?
So when you do this, what I would like to ask is, now that you're doing this with us, what would you tell people? What would you share with people? What would you want people to know about not necessarily your journey, but what it was in your journey that taught you to be able to look back to others and people today? Because there's my outpatient program, we work with a lot of professionals, and I have over the year, I've gotten referrals from the DA's office, U.S. Attorney, Border Patrol, LE, all over the place, and doctors. And we serve a lot of veterans in San Diego. And that's our primary client today. And I've worked with homeless and ex-offenders. So I've been around a little while, so that happens. So by the way, I'm thinking if I do the math right, you're going to have 30 years of recovery this year. Is that correct?
I had 30 years in January. Yes.
Very good. Very good. Because I got sober in 84. So this is my big year to get that zero. And I'm looking forward to it. So, but I don't know, with Fred, if I don't deal with my untreated trauma, and I don't think I have PTSD, but my sponsor thinks I might. So where's I going with this is what pearls of wisdom, what would you want to share with people that, because sometimes, you see somebody and you know exactly where their next footsteps are going to take them. And you wish you could shake them and open their eyes, but you know that they have to make their own journey happen. If you've been around recovery enough to know, because you could go to treatment for them, but that doesn't help. And I'm also an interventionist, so I work with families all the time, and I hear them just say, "Well, we told them to stop using drugs, and they just won't." So what would you want to tell people?
Part of it is I really want to make sure people know that there are choices about their recovery program. So, for example, when I went into rehab, they swore to me that 12 steps was the only option. And it was a bad fit for me for multiple reasons. I don't believe in a higher power. I wasn't going to turn my will and my life over. I didn't agree I was powerless. I didn't like the focus on defects, but they swore that was it. But it turned out even in 94, it wasn't. And so I found Women for Sobriety, which still exists today. I found the Parent for Smart Recovery, the Parent for LifeRing Secular Recovery. And for me, finding the different approach was really key to me being able to sort of, to feel that my instinct to sort of take control of my recovery and make decisions about my recovery, that was a approach and that others had succeeded that way. So for example, those other programs, one of the key ideas they share is a self-empowered recovery, that like LifeRing talks about how your success is based on your motivation and your efforts. And also that the nature of the recovery plan is really personal, that each person's plan will be different because, they're in a different place. They have different needs. They have different viewpoints. And so all of that as a basic concept was really key for my recovery. But self-empowered didn't mean I shut my ears off, right? I mean, part of it is listening and considering what's worked for other people. But I was the decision maker as to what techniques and strategies I was going to apply. And so part of it is just making sure people know that if they're in a program that's not a good fit, there are other options and other ways of approaching recovery that might work better for them.
So let me push you a little bit. So how would you guide somebody to understand that something's not a good fit versus just somebody who might, because, I being Jewish, when I came in, I had to learn to pray on my knees. It's like, I went to my rabbi. He says, no, you don't do that. I said, but everyone tells me I won't be able to stay alive unless I do. He says, nope, God's within us. And that's the way it works. I said, well, if God's within us, I'll tell you, he's a party animal because we had a hell of a week last week. But so how would you, because what happens I've seen, and by the way, thank you for sharing that. I think it's so important. I've done, and Fred will tell you, I'm full of data, and the percentage of relapse, it doesn't matter what program it is. The number is around 5% success. And when you go through and you look at all the different modalities and you look at all the different aspects that people will grasp onto, whether it's one-on-one, find a rock, make a candle, it doesn't matter. The outcomes are the same. And what's fascinating is there isn't one particular program that does better than the other. And what's even more fascinating, the people who've really done the deep research that weren't commissioned by like a Betty Ford, say that if you do nothing, you have a 5% chance of succeeding. So it's interesting, but the anonymous programs have gone global. They're around the world. They're easy to get into. But how would you help somebody understand? Because I see it all the time. I go to 6 meetings a week still via Zoom, and it happens to be a 12-step meeting. And I've experienced LifeRing, and I've done Smart Recovery, and the Buddha, and there's another one that I've gone to.
Dharma Recovery is the Buddhist one. Dharma Recovery is the Buddhist one.
Right. And I think there's one Atheist Anonymous. I've gone to probably every anonymous meeting somebody can go to that they'll let me in. And because I want to learn, I want to understand, because when I'm working with families, everyone's got something different going on. Everyone thinks they're unique. So back to you. How would you help somebody understand how to determine as best as you can, because, you can give people advice all day long. Don't walk out in traffic. Well, I'm in a hurry. I got to go that way. Well, okay. Not much you can do. You understand my question?
Yeah. So I'll say a couple things. One is that 5% number isn't lifetime success, right? That's each effort. And I just don't want people to be discouraged by thinking that in the long run, only 5% of people get recovered, because that's incorrect. But as far as what's the right fit for somebody, when I talk to newcomers, what I advise is that if they just read up on the 6 largest, and the 6 largest are 12 Steps, LifeRing, Smart, Women for Sobriety, She Recovers, and Dharma. They're not the only ones. There are others, but they're the 6 largest. If you look at their philosophy and the meeting format, because the meeting formats really vary a lot between programs, I really feel like if they read up on those, 1 or 2 of them are going to sound like that my people are there. Like people that think like me are there. People that approach it like me are there. Start with those programs. Though if it reads like the philosophy is the right fit, then you're going to have a better odds of success that's really going to be good for you. But I also encourage people to try multiple different meetings, multiple different formats, make sure that you can have that it's right for you, but also you can do more than one program. I did multiple programs and combined the ideas into a program that worked for me. So, for example, if you like some parts of 12 Steps, you don't have to give up 12 Steps to also go to LifeRing or also go to Women for Sobriety. You can do both. And I think that knowing that gives people sort of a little bit more freedom to feel like it's okay to try something else and see if there are any good ideas they might want to use.
Yeah. And let me quantify what I meant, what I said. the way I understand the science, if somebody does a traditional 30-day whatever, wherever, and does nothing afterwards, that's, it has no continuum of care of any kind. That's where the number comes from. And I believe it's scientific enough that, but I agree with you, because over time, and that's, by the way, a 12-month window. If you go 2 years and 3 years, the numbers change dramatically, but treatment centers don't keep track because they don't want to. And anonymous programs feel like they shouldn't and don't. So really, it's a science of people that are committed to understanding, I call the disease of addiction, but even they don't have longitudinal studies because people don't necessarily keep in touch unless it's a real micro group. But I think what's important is what we do today and go forward. To your point, I like your idea of pulling things from different places. Look, we do that with food. We do it with exercise. We do it in relationships. We do it with shopping. And there's no reason why we shouldn't do with our own personal self-care. I like that.
Well, the other thing is that what works for us at one point in our recovery may not work later, or we may be looking to add things to it later, right? So part of it to me is that recovery is an evolutionary process. It's an iterative process. And so something that really served our needs at one point may not be important later, or may actually be a negative. And for example, when I first went into rehab and they taught me, as in 12 steps, to say, the identifier, right? I'm Mary Beth and I'm an addict. At first I thought that was helpful to say it over and over to sort of beat it in my brain. But by 6 months, I wasn't comfortable with that anymore. I felt like I was saying it like it was the essence of who I was, and it isn't. Even then, it wasn't. And so when I went to Women for Sobriety, and the identifier there is I'm Mary Beth and I'm a competent woman, well, that really felt powerful to me and met me where I was at. And so what works for us at one point in our recovery may not serve us later, or we may just be ready for sort of the next step in our recovery process. And that could be a new idea from a different program.
So, hey, Scott and Mary Beth, I'm unsure if Mary Beth is a parent or has children of her own, but are the children of recovered addicts less likely to become an addict? Do we know any of that science?
Well, so there's a couple things about that, right? If you know, you are more likely, but why is a little fuzzier, because if you grow up in a house that's dysfunctional, that isn't meeting your emotional needs, that isn't nurturing, all those things, you're going to be more likely to develop a substance use disorder. And if you're living in a family with inactive addiction, that's more likely to happen, right? But there is also some evidence that part of it may be genetic. And so there's debate about that, but there is some evidence that maybe 25% of your risk is genetic.
You agree with that, Scott?
I like it. When I talk about the disease, I liken it to diabetes. You just, and most of the people I know that talk about it, using diabetes as an example, because it's not something you wake up one day and go, hey, Mom, Dad, can I have diabetes, please? Because I don't want to be an alcoholic. I'd rather have the other one. It's just, and that can be genetic generally, and it also can be diet driven over time. And if you live long enough, you're going to get everything anyway. So, I think that's a good question, though. And no one's figured it out yet, how to see if there's a test. At age 4, you take this test, and we know if you have ADHD, if you got untreated trauma in your future, or you're going to, be a victim of whatever. They don't have a test for it. And I think that's part of the mystery of life that, makes working on oneself. Once you understand it's okay to do that. And I like your example. There's a guy here in San Diego wrote a book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And you're absolutely right. And I'm 70 now. So I got to believe the tools I've gotten over the time has helped me get to where I am. But the fact that I think I'm still teachable allows me to understand that it's okay if I'm not right, or if it's okay if I say it wrong and someone says, that's not the way it is. Okay, I can take that. I'll absorb it. Although someone did call me stupid the other day, and that really pissed me off. But then they said, I didn't really mean you personally. I meant the world. Oh, okay. Yeah. Walk that one back.
The world.
So, what do you got?
So Scott, I did see in the Los Angeles Times, actually, how Craigslist is now they're doing research now. Were you aware of how easy it is to buy drugs off of Craigslist?
Well, we've been talking about Uber for years, Fred. So, Mary Beth, what's your experience? I don't know how active you are with, what's happening in that world anymore
Well, it's not just
that you live in.
Craigslist, right? I mean, Snapchat is a big target of families because they say that because of the way the messages disappear, then it makes it particularly prone to people, purchasing and selling, selling drugs. So it's social media and electronic purchases are a much bigger component today. And it shows up a lot when the younger kids are dying of overdose, right? Where did they get the pill that they thought was oxy, but turns out it was fentanyl. And a lot of times they got it online.
Yeah. Do you guys both agree that
Fred, you can, Fred, being in a state, California, where marijuana is legal, you can Google marijuana retail and, you can have an Uber driver pick it up. That there was a recent overdose of 3 separate groups in New York. It was all delivered by the same Uber driver, purchased from the same distributor, but they didn't know each other. And all 3 of those doses had fentanyl laced in it. So that all the people that got it at 3 different addresses in Manhattan all died from a bad batch. And
I was intrigued. I was intrigued that the LA Times interviewed drug dealers, anonymously, obviously, but they talked to 3 drug dealers, and when they're talking, you forget that they're just regular human beings. Some of these people, you do tend to forget, and they're talking like it's just a business. That's all it is to them, a business. And they actually carry. One of them was talking about how he carries Narcan on him for his clientele. It just was weird. It didn't hit me right, and then until I sat back and thought about it and said, yeah, these are human beings. They're just human beings making money, of course, illicitly, but they're being honest. It was interesting to read how they spoke about their clientele like they were just regular restaurant people coming to get a dinner or something like that. I don't know if that's...
But their customer retention tools are Narcan. I mean, the guy's trying to keep them alive so they can buy more of a dose for later. It's amazing what's going on, out there in the world today. And I don't know if you guys said it, and then I'll let you go, Mary Beth, but saw it today. But the what's the Surgeon General just came out with the new statistic about how many hours per day the average child is on the internet. 4.8 hours. So, and that's a whole another generation coming up that's going to have some real untreated trauma, in my opinion, simply because, the parental family unit, unfortunately is broken down over the years. And it's like kids are more independent now, they think, than they've ever been. But anyway, Mary Beth, go ahead. Looked like you had something to say on that other point.
About the drug dealers. I mean, I grew up in a small town. Most of the people that we sold drugs, you knew them socially. I mean, it's a community, right? And in some ways, it almost makes the online more dangerous because there isn't that personal relationship that's developed. And sometimes we talk about drug dealers like they're all these kingpins. I mean, a lot of drug dealers are your friends who bought, an eighth of something or a quarter ounce of meth, and they split it up, and we all pitched in and paid for part of it. And so when we talk about drug dealers, a lot of them are there's a lot of social aspects to that as well. Most drug dealers are not, the drug kingpins that are going out and selling in great volume. They're people that are in your local community.
Yeah, it's hard for me to look at Scott. I know he's 40 years clean, but at one point in his life, he was a drug dealer. He was selling drugs. And I look at him, I don't see that. I don't know that man. I can't even imagine that man at all. And it takes me, as the non-addict here, to sit back, and I really have to think hard about this. About, am I being fooled? Am I seeing the real sky? That's what goes through my mind at times is, am I being fooled by this? Or can people change, or do people change, and all that stuff? It's very confusing from the outside.
Well, the other thing is that a lot of the low-level drug dealers are dealing for their, to support their own personal habit, right? I mean, that's a lot of the motivation. And so I think that may be part of the explanation as to why the Scott you're looking at, isn't who you expect to be, he's not a criminal mastermind. Scott, I don't know why you were selling drugs, but my guess is a lot of that was just for your own self-supporting habit.
Well, you know, at first, no, and then yes, because you know, I was one of those people. You know, you're not supposed to use
Mhm.
your own stuff, and because I moved from marijuana to methamphetamine, but then I jumped to cocaine and hallucinogens. You know, and then I went from Boone's Farm to Southern Comfort. So, and then when I saw Janis Joplin get her free fur coat, I wrote to Southern Comfort, and I got T-shirts, and I had a license plate that said "So Comf." So I tried to stay as an alcoholic and just use drugs to get up the next day. So one of them was for medicinal purposes, and one was to anesthetize myself. And then I became poly-drug, and I stopped. And I don't even like to refer to myself as a drug dealer. I like to refer to myself as an unlicensed pharmacist. Kind of like being flippant rather than sarcastic. My mom helped me with the framing of the messaging as I grew up, and because just a way to work around people. And if you look at my books, my first book, that I thought it was, I was one of the people. I didn't look at myself as somebody who had a problem. I had depression, and if I could do this, I wouldn't be depressed. I was a traditional, and I was passed out in the street, Manhattan, picked up by the cops, a traditional alcoholic, but with an SUD issue that grew over time. But I think it's a modern part of my service work. I mean, I work 60 hours a week and volunteer 20. So I'm still kind of obsessed with that. And that's just who I am and how I roll. And the fact that Fred's used, we still haven't got a full diagnosis on him. We haven't seen the sheet, and we know over time, even with the UAs, we can't get a real read because, he comes with his own stuff in his pocket. But we'll get there with Fred. And I think through this, podcast, he's going to get better. And he's gotten much better since I've known him. We've actually never physically met, Mary Beth, but we talk every week. So let me ask you a question. I know our time's kind of wrapping up. What have we not asked you that we should?
Oh, well, I mean, that you should. I guess I'd say,
or that we forgot, or we didn't, but that you'd like to tell. You get all the way off.
I guess part of it is really just that, if anybody's listening and I can be of service, let me know, because I do try to use my story to be of use, to really try to show, like, for example, Fred, you were saying you're looking at Scott, you don't see a drug addict. Well, people, when I'm sitting in my robes, they don't see somebody who shot meth either. Right. And part of the reason I wanted to sort of own my whole story and not just be vague about drug use, but admit the details, was to try to help people to understand that, where we are when we're in the midst of the chaos and misery, not fun, misery of active substance use disorder is really not closely related to who we can be in our recovery, right? It's a very different life. You're in a very different space. And that's why when you look at me and I have 30 years and you look at Scott at 40, you don't see that person, because that person was struggling in a very different way. And we have healed, at least mostly healed. And so part of it is to sort of try to help people understand that substance use disorder is, a medical condition, and that if it can get resolved, that person can live a happy and productive life and be somebody you would be proud to know.
Well, how could people get a hold of your book?
So my book, again, From Junkie to Judge, One Woman's Triumph Over Trauma and Addiction, is on Amazon and all the usual sites, and your bookstore has it or can get it. But also, if anyone's interested, I've had opinion pieces in the Wall Street Journal and the LA Times and others, and those are on my website, which is junkietoJudge.com. And I am on Twitter, and I will say I do not argue with people on Twitter. I just try to provide information like new studies that come out, articles, or my recovery thoughts, and that's at Mary Beth O _. Oh, and you can message me through my website, and I answer all messages.
Excellent,
so,
excellent.
You got another quick question. Sorry, Fred. I would assume, because most professions have like their own little professional kind of a off the range group. Do you have a judges group you belong to, or judicial professionals group that you belong to, that you kind of keep in touch and help support each other kind of on the down low, or no?
Well, there definitely are lawyers assistance programs, which are recovery groups for attorneys, and and She Recovers has a legal professionals group. But also, I do continuing legal education training now for lawyers and judges, in which I talk about substance use and recovery, and also what they do wrong in the legal system sometimes in regard to drugs. And so So those are some of the resources for attorneys, yes. Because attorneys actually do have double the substance use disorder rate of the general population. It's a big problem in the legal profession.
I know that.
Is a lot of that problem.
I think their group's called the Other Bar, if I'm not mistaken.
In California, there's a group called the Other Bar, but nationally, it's usually called Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers or Lawyers Assistance Programs.
Yeah. Is a lot of their problem, is the problem with a lawyer being a user, do they think they're not going to get caught because of their status?
No, it's really a lot of it's that it's a high stress job with, long hours and a lot of pressure. You're supposed to be perfect. There's no breaks. And so substance use is just, people don't have time to be healthy a lot of times when they're dealing with that job. And so with every drug, you can list every drug, the attorney rate of substance use disorder for all of them is about double than the general population.
Yeah. Well, that's going to be it.
And it's above law enforcement, which is really, really high. As a matter of fact, there was an article here a couple of years ago where the National Bar Association self-disclosed at an annual conference, not knowing there was media in the room. And I think they talked about being north of the high 20%, which is pretty significant when you think about it. Law enforcement's 25. So they were saying lawyers having higher, same thing, same stress, who you talk to about it. And you can't really talk about it. And so it's, but the recovery community can be very small as well in communities. Okay. Sorry, Fred.
That's okay. I just wanted to wrap it up because I wanted to thank Mary Beth for coming on because I think she was very, very interesting woman. And we're both very proud of your 30 years. 30 years is something to be proud of. But we would actually like you to come back on anytime if you're welcome to it, because I think we could talk more about other issues and stuff. I think you're obviously smart enough and you have the experience and you show up on time. It's great. You're punctual. It's one of our top qualities. But so that's going to be it. Make sure you click below. You could buy Mary Beth's book, From Junkie to Judge. You could buy Scott's book. You could buy my book. You could buy all our books. It's a 3 for all. And that's going to be it. So you want me to say it, Scott, for Crisis Coach with Scott H. Silverman and Fred Carroll? If nobody's told you they love you today, we love you, and we will talk to you again next week. Goodbye, everyone.